What's up, buddy?
Me?
Yeah,
Wait. Oh, I was just in the other channel. Hold on, let me get off your stream.
sure thing, dude.
All right. So I hopped into that video like probably a quarter of the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And the only issue unless there was some huge qualifier at the beginning, it just seems like she is trying to paint like way too broad of a picture of any point that disagrees with her.
Like what?
Well, it just like the idea that you can characterize someone based off like some sort of undertone that isn't even there, but it's like somewhere out in the ether.
So the last part of the video actually addressed this specifically, is that it's really hard to identify, and that even she makes mistakes where she thinks some people might be signaling it, but they actually aren't. This is part of the kind of the goal of the way that they message. But
I mean, do you actually? I'm sure that there is some small subset of like right-wing people who do actually do that, or like when we're talking about that subset, it's essentially like racist people. But I do not agree that that's like anywhere near like a majority.
I totally agree. That's the point, though. The problem is that a small minority of people that are genuinely racist and genuinely hateful are able to manipulate large groups of people via messaging that's more palpable to them.
Yeah, that is what I disagree with like a lot. I don't think that anybody who is like what she was saying, a normie, basically.
Uh-huh.
I don't think any normie who believes in like right-wing things is actually getting accosted into this lifestyle by this like racial undertone.
Okay, I mean, I guess we can agree to disagree, but I've seen plenty of people that are starting to give strong arguments for why black people are genetically predisposed to crime, or why all Mexicans are like racist and murderous thieves.
Yeah, but that's anecdotal evidence, like you love to cite.
Which part is anecdotal? The part where Trump won the election based on this type of propaganda, or?
So yeah, I disagree. I don't think that you can actually make that argument. I think it's really easy to try to make that argument. And
wait, why can't I make the argument that Trump won the election based on a lot of pretty racist propaganda?
Because you can't attribute racism to people voting in a way that you dislike.
Well, it seemed like a lot of racism was a pretty big selling part of Trump's message. There was a lot of anti-Islam rhetoric. There was a lot of anti-Mexico rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're attributing racism to what you could call stupidity, and I don't actually think it's these stupid people who are voting for Trump that are, or I don't think that they're getting like convinced by this undertone of racism. You know what I mean? Like it's
people at his crowds literally chant, "Build the wall, build the wall." What do you think?
Okay, but you could argue for a wall in a way that's not actually racist. You know what I mean? Like you could have tight border control.
You could, but when your messaging is literally, we need to put up a wall because Mexico is sending rapists, murderers, and thieves here, that doesn't have racial undertones to you?
I mean, that definitely does, but it's...
Well, that was Trump's message. I mean...
Yeah, but he's not saying that the majority of them are.
He said like, that when Mexico sends people over here, they're not sending their best. They're sending rapists, murderers, and thieves, and some of them are good people, I imagine. Sounds like a minority there.
Yeah, but the illegal ways people are getting over here, actually, there were so many people who were like raping people coming over here.
Yeah, but when you say so many, that number is less than any native number I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen a number that says illegal immigrants commit crimes in greater proportion than natives.
Well, so now you're talking about once they get here, you're saying that it's probably the same crime, right?
No, it's less.
Where do you see that? I have a hard time believing that. I mean, and I would argue it's probably the same, but I have a hard time believing people who come here illegally are already committing, a crime to come here illegally are less likely to commit crime in the future. I would say that they're by default as likely as someone who's living here in the first place.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm sorry, one second.
Do you have that? Because I'm not even pro-Trump or anything. So
earlier you accused me of using anecdotes. So this is data pulled from a Cato study that they pulled from Census Bureau statistics. This shows
Where are you sending me this?
On Discord. So this shows the incarceration rates for illegal immigrants, legal immigrants, and all natives. And you can see that illegal immigrants compared to all natives is actually like half, and then legal immigrants is even further beneath that. So when you say that you feel like illegal immigrants commit more crime than natives...
I didn't say that.
Well, that's what it sounded like. You said you had a hard time believing it was the other way around, so I assumed that you meant the opposite was true. So I'm curious,
No,
like, you just thought that.
I assumed that it would be the same, but
Oh,
I'm looking at it right now.
okay.
Incarceration rates by immigrants.
Yeah, and you can, I link the fuller article that it comes from, and then you can go to the Bureau if you don't, I guess, think they misrepresented the stats or whatever. But I'm curious why you think that illegal immigrants commit more crime. Is it because of stories you've heard, or have you actually seen stats or numbers that point in the other direction?
No. Again, I didn't say that I think they commit more crime. I said if I had to assume without stats, like I just said, I would assume that they commit the same amount of crime.
Okay.
But I had a hard time believing because, I thought it would be rational to assume that if someone's committing one crime, they're probably more likely to commit a different crime in the future.
Gotcha. So you were a victim of propaganda, essentially, is what you're saying.
No, because I also wouldn't base policy around whether or not people coming here are committing crime, because that's such a small subset of the.
Why would you think that somebody that would risk their life illegally immigrating to another country would come here just to be a criminal? Couldn't they just be a criminal in Mexico?
Yeah, sure.
So it seems like you're basing your feeling that they're coming here to commit crime based on propaganda, based on spooky stories you've seen or news stories or whatever, but not on any actual hard data, right?
Okay, yeah, but I would never make a policy decision based on.
That's fine. You don't have to make a policy decision. You just have to feel a certain way, and then that's going to guide you when you go to vote at the polls. And the people that you vote in are going to be the ones making policy decision, right? We don't usually leave all of our policy in the United States up to referendum. So it's a problem. This is a problem, right?
So what are you saying is the problem?
Well, the problem is that right now you just demonstrated that you held a belief that was based on misinformation or fantasy, and that you're going to probably vote with that misinformation in mind, and you're going to vote for people that will write policy that will have an impact on people coming over based on a delusion in your mind.
Well, one, I didn't vote for Trump, and two, I'm saying that I just had an assumption there, so I never thought anything of it. You know what I mean? If I haven't thought of something, I'm not gonna hold.
Okay, well, this is just one assumption that you had that was completely backward. I bet we could find more if we were to go further.
Well, yeah, sure, but it's like, I don't know. You see, I don't know. I just think that you make these strange arguments. And
wait, what argument did I make? Strange?
The whole argument that you think that there's a large majority of people in the U.S. that are being swayed over with undertones of racism.
Well, when you have communities of people like anti-Semitic people that propose the Jewish question, or race realist people that think that Mexicans or Hispanics and Black people are inferior to the white race, or neo-Nazis like Richard Spencer that advocate for white ethno-state, when all of these people's beliefs are perfectly aligned with Trump's policies, it makes it hard to believe that there's not like some subversive attempt here to move a lot of people over into this train of thought by way of bogus science or bogus history.
I guess, but I feel like you're also kind of making an argument like, if you hold a viewpoint and then there are also garbage people who hold that viewpoint, you should reconsider your viewpoint.
Not necessarily. You just have to make sure that you're holding your viewpoint for the right reason, so that you don't kind of get moved over into
and that's what I'm saying, is people could hold these things for the.
But the problem is that often the end point isn't. So, like, for instance, building a wall isn't really rational. There's no real rational reason to have that viewpoint. You can't really make a good argument for it. The number of Mexicans in the United States, or people that come from Mexico, has decreased over the past decade. So that's a problem that's going away. I think like 60% of people that stay here that are illegal immigrants like overstayed their visas, so a wall's not going to help with that. There's no guarantee even that the wall itself will be effective. People can go over, under, or around via boat, or continue to travel through illegally via vehicles. So you have a position here that a lot of people have that has no basis in reality, that only further serves the goals of people that are legitimately racist, because it's probably not even really going to help the illegal immigration problem that much.
Yeah, okay. And one thing that I realized that I'm probably about to do that is a problem with a lot of people who are like Trump supporters, not that I am a Trump supporter, is like, I think he speaks extremely hyperbolically, and I know that you're probably going to say I could give the benefit of the doubt.
Well, no, I'm not going to say that. I'll just say that you're absolutely wrong, because Trump has already demonstrated via executive action and his own rhetoric in office that he wasn't being hyperbolic. He legitimately tried to ban Muslim-majority countries for no real reason from the United States.
I was talking about the wall specifically.
Okay, well, he's already tried to get funding from the wall in the congressional budget negotiations, so I mean, even that's not true.
I mean, yeah, but it's never actually going to happen. You know, and
but he's trying to make it happen. He is trying to get funding for the wall as part of the negotiations in Congress for the next budget. So it wasn't hyperbolic. It's stuff that he's actually trying to do.
I guess, but it's not going to happen, and I think that people know things like that aren't going to happen. And like when you hear
Okay, but
people
like, so
shouting,
on my end, I can show you people going, build the wall, build the
yeah, that's
wall.
what I was
I
just
can show
about to
you
say.
that Trump's rhetoric is saying he wants to build the wall. I can show you that when Trump goes to the presidency, he's trying to build the wall. And then you're telling me, well, I don't think any of those people really thought it because that's what I feel like. Which argument is more convincing there?
I mean, obviously, people yelling, but do you genuinely believe that people who are yelling "build the wall" are voting for him because he's going to build a wall? Like
I
that
mean,
seems like further out of the realm of possibility to me. Unless I'm way overestimating
so
the
you're
size
saying,
of Trump voters.
does it seem to me like people that show up at rallies and scream, build the wall, and then vote for a guy that says he's going to build a wall, and then support a guy in office who's trying to build the wall. You're saying, isn't it? It's not realistic that these people actually want to build the wall. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I think that the vast majority of people are actually just voting for Trump because he is the lesser of two evils. Like, I don't think anyone is actually so pro-Trump, or I don't think that any sort of majority of Trump voters are that pro-Trump. Like, they want all these crazy things like a wall or like to ban all Muslims, which you could argue wasn't even the goal in the first place.
Well, he on his website it's listed that he wanted a Muslim ban, like, and then he talked to Giuliani about trying to find a legal way to do a Muslim ban, and then he banned.
I'm pretty sure his quote was like a temporary Muslim ban until he
That's
could
a
improve
temporary
some
Muslim
vetting
ban is
process
still a
that was
Muslim
already,
ban.
yeah.
In order to
I
increase a
guess.
vetting process that he doesn't understand, that's already one of the strictest in the history of the world.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I don't think people who say that we need a better vetting process have actually looked into the vetting process.
So, like, if your argument is that you can't believe that people are actually this fucking stupid, I could almost believe that. But I mean, it's been demonstrated time and time and time and time and time and time and time again that when there's this cornucopia of evidence on one side that people actually do want this thing, for you to just say, well, really, do they really want it? I mean, they've proven it time and time again that they do. I mean, I haven't looked it up because I figured it was self-evident, but we could probably find polling data on people who want the wall. I mean, Gallup, the wall. I mean, I'm sure we could find this somewhere.
Yeah, okay, well, regardless, my goal is definitely not to defend.
Oh, well,
not
actually,
Trump
nowadays it looks like more people are favoring a path to citizenship, but I think that the people that went to these rallies and voted for Trump, I'm sure that...
Sure, and I'll agree that they're probably stupid, but my argument is that they're not, like,
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me recorrect that real quick. 62% of Republicans are in favor of building a wall along the entire U.S.-Mexican border. So a majority of them are still okay for building the wall. But a lot of them are also okay with giving them a path to citizenship as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, regardless, my point, like, with what I was saying about the video, the example that you're giving right now is people who are being swayed over by Trump, like, blatantly saying we need to ban Mexicans or whatever retarded thing, right? They're not being swayed over by, like, some random dude on Twitter who has a thumbs up thing in his fucking Twitter handle. And obviously it's more subtle than that, or it's less subtle than that, what she's saying. But
so, like, the problem is that, like, here's the problem. The problem is that if I go in your centrist world where everybody's innocent, I can get people so fucking close to being racist that moving them over to racism is very fucking easy. That if I go by all of Trump's rhetoric, okay, I can take somebody who is anti-immigration, okay? They're so anti-immigration and they're so fuck Mexico that they want to build a wall between the countries. They want Trump to enact a 20% tariff on all products coming from that country. And they want Trump to renegotiate NAFTA because they think Mexico got the benefit of us. These are all things that exist in reality today, okay? Now, I can also take those same groups of people and I could say things like stop and frisk, treating black people unfairly in the United States, that's okay. I think stop and frisk is a good idea. Cutting taxes to the rich and leaving a larger burden to be shouldered by the poor, and curbing back things like welfare, like the ACH, whatever, things that inarguably have a higher impact on poor black people, right? These are all things that I can have that are really good. Anti-Muslim, and a lot of Muslims are brown. Now, maybe that doesn't matter, but a lot of Muslims are banned. We want to get rid of all Muslims. Muslim terrorism is a huge fucking deal. We need to ban all Muslims from the country. We need to kick them out. Fuck us. We need to keep them from ever coming, right? If I have you believing all of these things, okay? If you believe all of these things wholeheartedly, it's not really that difficult to move you into this idea that, hey, white people are genetic... What?
You just said that you were just talking about centrists. What centrists believe that?
Every fucking
single point.
Sargon of Akkad does. Armored Skeptic, the big anti-globalization, anti-immigration, protecting your Western culture bullshit. Lauren Southern. Yeah, these people say this shit all the time.
You call Sargon of Akkad or Lauren Southern centrist?
Well, I say that, but Sargon actually calls himself a leftist. But
what?
Yes, so Sargon is a self-described leftist. Lauren Southern, I don't know. I think she describes herself as a conservative or whatever, but she's often cited by the centrist people or whatever. But the if I have you here, if you believe all these things, getting you to believe that colored people are just genetically predisposed to being, more likely a criminal or whatever, that's a pretty easy step. Like, it's not that far removed. Like, it already fits your whole worldview that we need to keep colored people from coming here. The colored people in the country need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and work their shit instead of getting welfare handouts, and that we need to keep colored people that celebrate other religions away from this country, right? It's not that hard to move you into the idea that white people are genetically gifted in some ways compared to colored people. That's not really that hard to do. Do you see how close you are there?
I guess, but I have two problems. One,
Sure.
with Sargon, that's kind of proving my point of, like, the people being kind of, I mean, I don't know what you think about him. I saw, like, part of one of your talks with him, but I think that he's just kind of, like, not too bright. Now, I don't want to sound like a douche, like, on my high horse or something, but I feel like he's just not that bright, and he's definitely not being, like, I don't know, the idea that he's just like being swindled by these racists who are like using him as a platform for alt-right. Like,
I mean, Richard Spencer literally tweeted that Sargon is a great stepping stone to white nationalism.
Because he agrees with what he said.
Yeah, because his platform is almost impossible to differentiate between an authentic white nationalist platform.
From what I've seen, I disagree very strongly.
I mean, he sits there and he rallies against Muslims and that horrible immigrant infestation in Europe, that all these Muslims and colored people are going to Europe and raping gangs and everything all over, that the United States has a right to protect itself, for multiculturalism is the enemy and diversity is our greatest strength, is bullshit. Like, he has all the good talking points, like that black people are disadvantaged in the United States because they're just too dumb to get married. And
so this is what I was saying, but he has non-racist ways of arguing for these things, and it's again the matter of like not holding a belief just because bad people hold the belief. Like, if he believes those for rational reasons, which I've seen him argue
but
for,
he doesn't have rational reasons. All the reasons are bullshit, and
like
it's been.
what?
Like anybody that argues against globalization is a clueless fucking retard. There are no good arguments against it, and the entire world is becoming globalized, whether you like it or not. It's positive economically. It's probably positive culturally, although that's a harder thing to argue because different people value different things. And it also benefits countries that need help the most, like joining the first world, countries in Africa, some countries in South America. Globalization is something. No sane economist ever publishes papers about like globalization is bad. Now, there are some effects that are negative that disproportionately impact some groups of people that need to be rectified.
Like poorer people.
Sure. Well, poor people also benefit a lot from globalization as well. But no sane economist, this is why they never show like an article like, oh, like Krugman or anybody else, like, oh, these guys have come out and said that globalization is bad. Like, it just doesn't happen. So this is something that you can argue against all you want, but you're not giving any rational arguments for it. And the best arguments in opposition to globalization are usually racist ones. I want a country for white people. I don't want black people or brown people coming to my country. I need an ethno-state. Those are the best arguments for anti-globalization.
You think those are the best arguments?
Yeah, of course.
As opposed to disputing the economic impacts.
No, the economic impacts aren't disputed. There is nobody in economics that will argue that, like, oh yeah, countries all lose out horribly from globalization. It's just not true. I don't believe that's true because I've never read it in my life. If you've ever read something where an economist points to like globalization destroying a country, I know there's example after example of the opposite being true. But
no, well, the argument generally is that you're increasing like an economy of scale, and that more people equals more people to sell things to, more people. But if you're disadvantaging a poorer community, there's totally an argument to be made as opposed to.
Yeah, but the argument becomes one of redistribution, not this retarded right thing where the whole thing has to be fucking axed, right?
Yeah, but redistribution is something that a lot of people disagree with very strongly.
That's fine. Then you're a fucking moron. There's no legitimate argument against it. We have a progressive tax system for a reason. The idea that every single person in society can shoulder the same exact percentage burden of funding, then it's just a ridiculous idea. It's just not rooted in any reality whatsoever.
The idea that rich people aren't dodging out on a lot of these taxes through through all sorts of deductions or offshore accounts is retarded.
Wait, what do you mean? What?
Like, how can you argue that redistribution is like so simple? Because the idea behind redistribution is you're doing something like with the immigration argument. You have people coming in; these people increase the workforce, lower wages, people can create more businesses, whatever. So you're essentially saying that the people who are wealthy get wealthier, and it should be easier to redistribute the money because they have more. But if you are in a system where these people at the top have so many loopholes for taxation, how is that redistribution going to happen effectively?
I mean, you find ways to make it happen. I mean, it has to happen.
Okay, yeah, but the argument is that it's not being done effectively, and
okay, but this is the
therefore
difference.
people at the bottom.
This is the argument: is that you have to make a way to make it happen effectively. You're never going to have a functioning society where a poor guy is paying the same percentage on his income as a rich person. It doesn't work that way. Countries won't function that way.
Okay, but so you genuinely are telling me you don't see how someone could make the argument that it's impacting the poor people currently, and the situation isn't being remedied fast enough, so they're against it, against
what?
A lot of people coming into the country, like just for one specific example.
That's not like a good example of like, that's not how you would approach solving that problem. This is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? If we've got something that gives us a ton of pros and a few cons, because those few cons aren't being remedied, we've got to toss out the entire idea. That doesn't make any sense.
No, I'm not saying you have to throw out the entire idea at all, but I'm saying that there are totally people who could argue against it because it's impacting a certain group of people who it should arguably impact the least. And it's not fixed as of right now.
So then we get rid of all the pros because there are a couple cons?
I don't think that anybody argues against like immigration. Also, there are problems with the economic argument, I'm pretty sure, anyway. Like, for example, your argument is essentially that people coming into the country, and this is obviously say I don't know if your chat's gonna fucking flame me, but say immigrants come in and do like labor intensive work, you know what I mean? They like, is that fair to generalize?
Sure.
Like, you generally don't have people immigrating illegally, like just picking up doctorates. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you argue someone comes in, they're willing to accept a lower wage. Let me know if at any point you disagree with anything I'm saying.
Okay.
They're willing to accept a lower wage, so it's easier for somebody who may or may not have been able to create a business can create one now because there are people willing to accept lower wages, which means they make more money, which means more houses need to be made or whatever. And then the money somehow gets funneled to the people who are screwed out of a job. Like, do you not see how that's a tough argument to actually make in reality?
Face Destiny is okay
so
too.
Your argument is that people that are immigrating are destroying wages from lower class people. The problem is that like the data just doesn't reflect this. Like, I understand that that's like a really cool hypothetical, but the data just doesn't reflect this. It seems
This is the hypothetical that you've made.
But the thing is that my hypotheticals are generally backed by data.
But I'm taking your hypothetical.
Okay, in my hypothetical, those people are trained into different positions that are complementary to the workforce that's already moving there, or more job opportunities open up so these people are still able to maintain jobs because a greater demand is created from people moving over and demanding more products. Like, those are my hypotheticals, and the data that backs that up is that most people that legally or illegally immigrate over that fill these lower class positions, one, only impact a very certain group of Americans, which are usually Americans that don't hold a high school or college degree, and that two, the impacts on their wages are incredibly hard to trace, such that it's probably only a few percentage points over a decade. Like, it's not like all these people are unemployed because of immigrants. That data doesn't exist.
I didn't say it was. I said that it would be harder for people to get jobs, that's obviously...
How is that obvious? The unemployment rate in the United States is like 5% right now. Where are all these people that don't...
If you have more people coming in, willing to accept a lower wage, then it's obviously going to be harder to get a job at the same wage.
Okay, but more people coming in and
But
accepting lower wage.
you're saying that it doesn't play out.
I'm saying that there are a couple of phenomena going on here. One, if 10 legal immigrants come in and they want to work at McDonald's, right? That means that maybe you open another store, there's going to be positions for managers or supervisors opening up as well, jobs that natives are able to fill. These are called complementary positions, and they tend to open when legal immigrants come in, right? You've also got a greater demand that's being made because there are more people there, so you can open more businesses to serve as well, to serve the society as well, which will also lead to natives getting jobs. These hypotheticals that I'm giving seem to be the one that play it in reality, because anytime you try to trace the impact of immigrants on native wages, the native wages never really seem to drop more than a few percentage points, and it's only the group of people that are specifically impacted, which is people without high school degrees.
Okay. So I don't see how you can say that an argument against it is so absurd, though. Like, someone could hold the viewpoint that
because the data doesn't back the argument. I just gave you all the reasons why it's absurd. It's a bad argument to make.
You said that it does negatively affect them.
Very, very minorly. There are a couple percentage points, but the gains are everywhere. You can argue that fiscal gains are either a wash or positive. The economic gains are very tangible to the business owners and to the people that enjoy lower costs of goods. There are plenty of economic gains. There might be small to negligible fiscal gains, and the only or small to no fiscal gains, and that the only people that are impacted are a very, very small group of natives, but everybody else wins out overall. So the idea would be you should address the small group of natives that are hurt, not get rid of this whole program entirely and get rid of all the benefits of it just because this very small group of people is impacted.
Sure. Okay. Well, whatever. I didn't come on for the economics debate, and you clearly know more about it than me.
Sure, I can send you, after, if I do my Fuentes debate, I've got a ton of data that I've put on this. My problem is just that, all of the arguments for this stuff generally fall apart when you critically analyze them, and the only strong arguments left are, I want an ethno-state. I just don't want brown people here.
I see there, I disagree. Still. I don't see how you can discount the view. One person, say Sargon, for instance, could say that the people who are struggling the most in the United States need to be protected the most. You know what I mean? I don't see how this could.
Yeah, and the problem is making cars more expensive from Mexico by way of tariffs and enacting protectionist policy that brings automation back to the U.S. that just ends up being automated anyway doesn't work to help these people. That all of his rhetoric about tariffs and anti-immigration and anti-globalism only end up hurting poor people. So even though that's the argument he's making, it doesn't really help anybody. The only people that are served in the end, if his arguments win, the only people that really win in the end are people advocating for an ethno-state, because they found a useful idiot that will sit there and help propagate a platform that only serves to keep less brown people in the country. That's all that happens at the end of the day. Poor people aren't going to win out because of protectionist policies.
Okay, well, you're probably right. But to kind of bring it back to what I came on here to argue was about that video being dumb. The people who are being convinced over to this side aren't being convinced there through this subliminal messaging or in a slightly different way, dog whistling, who was that? Whoever that YouTuber was.
ContraPoints?
Was saying. Yeah, ContraPoints.
I don't know. I think look at, how do you think JonTron happened?
I don't know who JonTron is.
So JonTron is a guy that I argued with who started off, it seems like he probably had good intentions, who was full on talking to me about building an ethno-state, and he didn't even realize it. He was talking to me about the demographic suicide of the United States and the need for Hispanics to integrate into the gene pool. He had no idea that he was arguing for an ethno-state.
How is this subtle?
I don't know. Ask JonTron. All the people that
it's not subtle.
Most of the people that hate me now, most of the lay centrists, Richard Lewis included, most of the people that hate me now are people that think that JonTron wasn't being racist, that JonTron just misspoke, that I used my debate tactics to get him to say things he didn't mean. And these are the things that JonTron was telling me, that the reason why blacks commit crime in the United States is the same reason why blacks commit crime in Africa, that Hispanics can immigrate into the United States. Yeah, that Hispanics can immigrate into the United States as long as they integrate into the gene pool. That these are the arguments that we have to keep a white majority in the United States, that we're committing demographic suicide by replacing our white babies with Mexican ones. These are the arguments that JonTron was making, and he's a half Iranian immigrant.
Okay, so my point is that that's not at all a subtle argument.
but he got sucked over to it. And Sargon of Akkad defended him and helped foster it. The reason why I talked to JonTron is because I heard JonTron on a Sargon live stream before where I could tell what direction JonTron was headed in. Sargon was there, and I don't think Sargon is racist. Sargon was there reaffirming every single fucked up thing JonTron said. Like, yeah, multiculturalism is bad. Yeah, we need to curb immigration. Yeah, Islam is a huge fucking problem. He was reaffirming every one of these beliefs. They're not really bad on their own, but taken in the totality, it was really fucking easy for JonTron, based on whatever the fuck he read, to get moved over into this blacks in Africa are the same as blacks in America platform. Like, it happened with him, literally. Okay, and Sargon was there championing him on the whole time. Maybe because I spend more time like buried in these communities, maybe I just see it more, but...
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, I guess because you do these debates and stuff a lot or whatever. But I don't... Like, that's not subtle. Like, the idea that...
It's not subtle. Well, listen... Maybe it's not subtle because maybe you yourself aren't racist and maybe you don't have a lot of these views. But this is the whole point I'm trying to get across here, is that if you've got somebody who's convinced that globalization is bad, immigration is bad, black people are lazy and they are generally just committing crime because they're fucking black people, that Muslims are all bad, that most people from brown countries shouldn't be immigrant, right? If you already believe all of these things, telling somebody a couple of race realist things isn't really that big of a deal. You say it's not subtle now, maybe because you're not as far over there, but once you're all the way over there, it's not really that difficult to just take on one or two new ideas. Like, maybe white people really are genetically superior to black people. Like, that's not really that crazy of a thing to think about. Like, look at all the black people around the world that have problems. Look at all the brown people in the world whose countries suck. Like, they all want to come to the white countries. Maybe it's because we're the smartest and best. Like, that's not really that hard to move that person over into that territory.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well, this is my whole argument.
But they're not going to be swindled over here without someone explicitly saying that.
It seems like it happened to JonTron. I mean, he's just one person, but like, well, look at all the marches in like Charlottesville. When was the last time we had large scale like white nationalist fucking marches in the United States?
Large scale white. Okay, so here I feel like you're just like reading headlines or like seeing.
Sure, I'm sorry. So there's not like a predominantly Nazi community. I don't think there are. Well, I don't know how many white nationalist marches are happening in the United States, but Charlottesville was a legitimate white nationalist march. That was legitimately a white. When was the last time we had like headline grabbing like white nationalists? There had young people on social media tweeting it out. That had people on Twitter and whatnot defending it. Young, smart, suave looking guys in suits, guys that were well spoken. Like, when was the last time this happened? Like the KKK, like.
I feel like you're like way overblowing how many Nazis there are in the country.
No, this is the problem. It's not that there are a lot of Nazis. It's that there are Nazis here, and almost all of their rhetoric is lining up with Trump. So much so that Trump took days to finally fucking call these people out. Trump was on the news being like, well, what about the alt-left? What were they doing there with the alt-right? Like saying these dumb... It was like pulling fucking teeth to try to get this guy to just say Nazis are bad.
Yeah, and he said that.
Yeah, like days later.
I don't know the timeline, to be honest. If you're going to say it was days later, you're probably right. But I don't know. I feel like that. Can we agree that that dude like has a clear ego issue?
I'm sorry. Wait, which dude? Oh, Trump. I guess, but a lot of people support him.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think that he is like, in his idiotic way, just didn't want to condemn those people, probably because
they're his supporters.
They supported him. Yeah.
You don't see the problem with a president who's being supported by white nationalists that want to make them...
No, he did, but the fraction of his supporters that are white nationalists is probably sub 1%.
Then why wouldn't he just come out and condemn it?
He did.
Like days later.
Well, when he did it, it was so nonchalant. Have you seen the clip where he actually does it? He says, and I'm not talking about white nationalists, KKK.
Later, but initially he said there were good people on both sides. Like,
well, because you could argue that the whole argument with that was the Robert E. Lee statue or whatever, right? You're going to tell me that there's not an argument to be made that's not racist to keep those statues around?
I'm saying that if you're saying there are good people on both sides and the other side is a problem too, when you're talking about a neo-Nazi rally, it's probably not a good position to take.
It's okay, do we really... Okay, Donald Trump and tact are just two things that don't go together.
Okay, well, it's not going together in the perfect way to like support white nationalist propaganda. Like, I can't write. If
If
I
you
was a
buy
white
into this
nationalist,
ContraPoints video.
if I was a white nationalist, I couldn't write Trump any better. He plays the role perfectly. Like, what could I do better? Here's a question. What would Trump have to do for you to consider him as being somebody that kind of is like inadvertently supporting white nationalist propaganda?
Implement legislation that supported white nationalist
Okay,
propaganda.
how about trying to get a wall built to keep out Mexicans? How about trying to get rid of DACA? How about trying to keep Muslims from coming into the country?
I think the argument with DACA is that it was not completely legally.
So then that's not enough. You need more. Let me ask you again.
Yes,
What does Trump have to
fine.
do to be considered
I
like
just told
somebody
you.
that... No, you said it was to support legislation, and I said he has. And now you're giving me other reasons why. So tell me what Trump has to... Does he literally have to hang a fucking blackie in the street? Does he have to hang him and set him on fire? Like, what does Trump
Obviously
have to do?
not.
So where is the line? I'm curious, because you haven't given me it. What does Trump have to do for you to think that, like, okay, well, he actually is, like, he's being the perfect platform to support white nationalist propaganda? What does he actually have to do?
Let me think of an example. I mean, I'm not saying that nothing would. It's obviously hard to come up with some specific random example that, hasn't happened.
Isn't that the problem? You
No.
literally just said it. It's hard to
What?
think of something that Trump would do that he hasn't
Oh, well,
already
I
done.
could-
Fuck.
I'm trying to think of something realistic. You know what I mean? I could think of any stupid.
Yeah,
thing
that's
that
the
he could
problem.
do
You
that would
can't
make
think
people
of anything realistic because he's literally fucking done every possible thing, like shitting on Black Lives Matter, shit, like the big fucking take a knee shit, implying that people that protest the flag and white nationalism and shit should get fucking thrown out of the country or should be like should be fired from their jobs. Like,
Well, in the same way that the left has a lot of like just sensational headlines, there are a lot of sensational.
can you give me an
headlines
example of policy from the left that does this? Not people on Twitter,
Does
not
what?
headlines that push some sort of like racial agenda or something. Like, what's like policy from the left that you consider to be like really harmful or whatever? That's on the same scale as like Trump.
I can't tell if you're actually joking right now.
No, I'm being serious.
You're joking.
Can you give me an example?
What I could think of legislation that is beyond what Trump's done.
Okay,
that is racist
I'm
to
curious.
a-
Like what?
Affirmative action. How's that not racist towards white people, or towards men, or towards whoever?
So the idea behind affirmative action.
I know what the idea behind affirmative action is.
Okay, so in a lot of the places that it's implemented, it doesn't even really affect white people that much, if at all. For instance, when the University of Texas tried to implement affirmative action, they still took the top 10% of everybody that graduated. They didn't change that at all. The affirmative action only applied to people that weren't in that top 10%. And a lot of people that endorse affirmative action things get funding from other areas to offset it anyway. And also, there's a lot of affirmative action that doesn't disproportionately impact white people. What if I open up sorry, go ahead.
So to kind of play your game here, what would the left have to do to make you see something that's racist towards white people? Because if that's not blatantly against white people, and I'm not saying that it's absurdly against them or white people are oppressed or have less privilege than other races or anything, but the idea that that's not a blatant thing that is disadvantageous to white people is wrong.
It's
Like,
probably
what would the left
so because you can make intelligent arguments for affirmative action that aren't "I hate white people." Right? The idea behind affirmative action is that there are groups that have been disproportionately impacted by state-sponsored programs like Jim Crow laws in the United States of America that affirmative action hopes to reconcile. Affirmative
Okay,
action...
how about...
Okay,
We'll go on.
go ahead.
How about how Asian people were put in internment camps in the United States?
Yeah, that was really fucking horrible. I don't think anybody
Right?
defends that today, do they?
That's pretty messed up. So isn't it kind of messed up that Asian people are essentially, it's like the right-wing meme. They have like SAT score points or whatever taken off, and they have harder like requirements. Not
Well-
like written in requirements, but they're taken a higher score on an Asian person is taken less seriously than a white person or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's because of
Right,
affirmative
that way.
action for white people, yeah?
Okay, so why aren't the Asians being helped out?
Because most
If
of
they
them
were-
don't
if
need
they were-
it.
Okay, so what would the left have to do? That
Wait,
would be
hold on, wait.
racist
The
towards
reason
people?
why affirmative action isn't enacted for Asians is because most of the Asians that come to the United States are coming over here from other countries to study. Asians are usually overrepresented in the wealthiest areas of the countries that they come from.
Yeah.
If an Asian is migrating from China to come to the United States, it's because the family is
Yeah.
usually very wealthy, very educated, or a combination of the two.
Yep. But they're totally poor Asian communities, and it's not like these things are helping them.
Yeah, that's possible
And
that
you
they
could
don't. And in
probably
cases
make
like
the
that,
argument that
then I would argue that sure, I think most affirmative action should target socioeconomic conditions rather than
yeah,
race, but race and
that's what I
socioeconomics
would
are
agree.
tied together like really heavily in the United States.
Right, but it's not fair. Like, why couldn't it just be?
When you say it's not fair that everybody isn't born into the same circumstance. I mean, the fairness
Sure.
here is like really arbitrary.
Yeah, it ends up coming on. I feel like the whole personal choice arguments. I don't even want to get into that. But
I can take issue with some affirmative action policies, but the argument exists for it that is a very valid argument that groups of people have been disproportionately impacted, and that we try to seek to rectify that in some ways, not as like retribution or revenge, but just to encourage these groups of people to climb.
So why not get rid of it completely and re-implement it in a way that is helping people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged?
I would probably be in favor of that, sure.
Okay, so
but the idea that the current
right now not something bad from the left.
Because it kind of is, but the idea that affirmative action that exists on the left that you can make plenty of legitimate arguments for is somehow the same as wanting to build a wall to keep out all Hispanics. I don't think these two things are like things.
I don't think you can make the argument that it's actually rational if you really tried, because
you can make the argument because Jim Crow didn't affect only poor blacks. Jim Crow affected you if your skin color was black. Like,
yeah. Okay, so why not just implement it for people who are still disadvantaged today as a result of those things?
Because tracing those disadvantages are really, really, really fucking hard.
You could just implement it in a way that, like we just said, socioeconomic status.
Sure, and I would probably be okay with that, but I'm sure there are still
so the argument for it is bad.
But there are probably still I don't know the arguments in favor of affirmative action completely, but I do know that socioeconomic and racial factors tie in very closely. So even if you did make it tied to socioeconomic status, you'd probably still see affirmative action done in a lot of the same ways. Maybe some wealthy blacks wouldn't take advantage of it. Maybe some more poor whites would be in it. Although there are also a lot of school-related financial aid things that help poor white people as well as poor black people and whatnot.
Yeah, I get a lot of help from financial aid from things like this. I'm not saying the system is like absurdly broken.
Sure, I'm just saying that like we're like cutting hairs a little bit. And personally, I could see like affirmative action being done on more of like a socioeconomic status rather than a racial one. But there are legitimate arguments to make it racially related because of our history with racial injustice in the United States.
So this is your opinion?
No, that's not my. Do you think that racial injustice happened in the United States?
Oh, obviously.
Okay. So affirmative action to address that racial injustice isn't on the same level as I want to build a wall to keep out Hispanics. Or I want to ban Muslims from coming to the country.
You're assuming like infallible logic from every single person in the country. But even still, with your argument from the left, so you said to me like, what would Trump have to do to make you think he's a racist? And I can't think of anything right now. But
because when we talk about somebody,
but obviously there are some things.
Sure. Okay. So if we think about things that are racist, right? I can point to Trump making negative statements about Muslims, negative statements about immigration all over the world of brown people moving to white countries, negative statements about Hispanics. And then when you point to me affirmative action, I can't think of any left-leaning senators or congressmen that have said things like, I really think that we need to put white people in their place. We really need to keep white people down. We really need less white people in schools, right? It's generally more of the affirmative of the other side, that we need to increase black representation in the schools. We need to have a more diverse whatever bullshit community here. We need to give advantages to people that have been socioeconomically disadvantaged due to injustices in the past. The approach to these two things is very different.
I feel like you're saying that words from the right are worse than actions from the left.
No, because when we talk about like trying to build the wall, banning Muslim majority countries, stop and frisk, paper please, these are policies from the right. These aren't just words on the right. These are policies on the right.
Yeah, but there are also policies on the left that...
The only policy you've given me is affirmative action that doesn't even impact a majority of Americans, and even of the people that go to school. It doesn't impact the majority of people that go to schools. And even of the affirmative action, you can make...
It's in hiring too, but...
You can make legitimate arguments in favor of... And even for hiring, like there's still evidence that race-based discrimination exists insofar as hiring goes, and that's independent of socioeconomic status.
I think the argument there is implicit bias, but yeah.
Well, the argument there is that you can do a study and you can actually measure the bias based on the hiring, based on the person's name.
So for an example like that, how would you counteract that with policy in a way that's not racist?
think we're using
This
like
is the
two, like
problem.
you're using like race-based policy to mean the same thing as like racist. These are two very different. Like the connotation between this is like Trump's policy might be race-based, but it's rooted in racism. The idea that some race of person is probably inferior to another race, just because another policy might talk about race, doesn't make it a racist policy.
I mean, I kind of disagree with that, because if something is discriminating or making any decision based on race,
It's
there's
racist.
obviously, well, it's not racist. Like, when we say racist, we impute like bad intent. Like, something could have good intent, like affirmative action, but actually not be like an ideal policy, because it actually does have a negative impact on some race.
Okay, I guess I just disagree. I think you can have race-based policy that isn't racist, but I guess we're
Yeah, but
probably
if
not
you
gonna...
have race-based policy, then it's obviously doing something like making some decision based on race, which is by definition racist.
Okay, if I have 100 people in a room, 20 of them are black, 80 of them are white,
Yep.
and of the black people, 18 of them are socially disadvantaged, and of the white people, 5 of them are socially disadvantaged, or 18 of them are... And then I make a policy that looks at both groups of people and slightly favors black people to get the representation better. You think that's
It's
a
a
racist...
garbage policy, because why wouldn't you just make it on socioeconomic status? There's no argument you could ever think up that would make race-based policy
The
better.
argument is that you don't want groups of people to be disproportionately in some sort of a lower socioeconomic class, that you want to
So
increase...
why not make it on socioeconomic class in the first place, as opposed to race?
Okay, so let's say that we have, in the same scenario, we've got 100 white people and 100 black people. Let's say 85 of the black people are poor and 30 of the white people are...
It's going to be the same argument, but yep.
Yeah, well, so if we take, let's say that we have 60 slots in our program with no affirmative action, and we take 30 white people and 30 black people. Well, in our new society, 100% of white people are no longer poor and 50% of black people are poor. That policy didn't really help in terms of like representation of society much. Right? Because half the black people...
About if it was race-based?
No, if it wasn't race-based, if we only went socioeconomically, if we took all the poor white people and 30 of the poor black people, now every single white person is wealthy, and now half the black people are still poor.
Well, in what world would it be all the white people? Unless
Okay,
there was
we could
some
change
policy
this to any percentage you want to make it like more palpable. But if you did like only socioeconomically related affirmative action, you could argue that the effect would be the same. That more white people will get in, less black people will get in, and now more white people who are already wealthy will have greater numbers of white people, and the black people who are still
Or
disproportionately
it could be more black people than more white people, and I wouldn't care either way. If it was socioeconomics and the people who applied for the socioeconomic help in the first place, who were disadvantaged, whoever applied first got it. I don't care if 100% of the recipients are black or 100% are white. Like, I don't see why that's relevant at all.
Because the idea of affirmative action-based policy is to get a greater representation of the different races throughout the different levels of society.
See, that's stupid.
Okay. All right. Do you have any
We
other...
might just not agree on that. No.
Probably not. Do you have any other questions or whatever? Or...
No, good talking to you, though.
All right. I love you, buddy. Stay safe. Be
See you,
careful.
dude.
Ripperino, cappuccino, puppuccino.